Cool. All right, guys, I'm going to start. So my OCD has kicked in, and because obviously the main event is coming up in 23 minutes, as you can see, I'm the warm-up act. So Simon briefly introduced us. All that I'm going to discuss tonight is my experiences, what I, or how I coach. So a lot of the stuff you might have done before, I expect you would have, as I'm going to kind of touch on later on. But rather, I don't want to say that this is me telling you, because this is me telling you my experiences. And what you take from that is up to yourself. As Simon said, he's working with Dublin GA now. Previously worked with Ulster GA as a Department of Education physical literacy coach. Went to New York, came back, was with Special Olympics Ireland, and now with Dublin. I'm also at Leeds Beckett doing a professional doctorate on play with Sergio Larbercial. Sergio was my supervisor. So I'll be talking about my research as well. And this is why I'm the warm-up act, is because I'm only starting on my journey. So hopefully you will get something out of it. Now, I'm going to touch on why, who, and how. So why is play important? Who's it for? And how can you tie it all together? And how I tie it all together, and what I'm going to show you a few things that I work on, and a few things that work very well for me. But again, that doesn't mean that it's going to work well for you, or it depends on your group, etc. And I'll discuss that later on as well. So first of all, why? Play is a human right for children. It's in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child in Article 31 and in Article 12. Now, I could spend an hour, maybe 2 hours, going through the actual rights of the child in terms of the convention. However, I'm going to touch on a little bit of how I work and how I use the articles kind of to underpin everything that I'm doing. And one of the things that kind of comes out, and what I've been reflecting on in terms of my coaching and my research, my coaching from the very start, from having in service with Terence McWilliams and my colleagues at Ulster GA right till now, I've learned so much, have had so many mentors and people that have taken things from, and I've used it, put it into my toolbox, for want of a better word. But the basic premise for my coaching is to ask the children, get them involved in their coaching, get them involved in their play, but not to overstimulate in terms of what I want. It's about them. I might have an idea and a theme, but again, it's about them. I'm not going to put my coaching onto them. If they're playing and they're enjoying it, great. And you'll see kind of how I do a few things later on. But again, it's a human right. It's not up to coaches to let children play. Children are going to play. Children are going to learn through play. And I know Richard's going to touch a little bit more on this later on. But it's not on us to let the children play. It should be up to us to facilitate it. To help them, make sure they're safe, but again, to let them at it and have a go. And I'll be talking about that later on as well. So, the child of play, and during the research, and kind of in terms of my own research through occupational therapy and anthropology and everything else, and all the kind of boring stuff, but in terms of where play comes from and all the different research on play, and there's, in comparison to other aspects, there's very little in terms of sport and play. So play can be viewed as the child not learning. However, obviously there is research, and there's quite a body of research that shows that that is not the case, that they are learning as they play. They're understanding their own emotions. They have conflict resolution. It's meaningful to them. And it brings order to chaos, because it's their work. And as I say, as Anita Waldy, I love this quote, "Today I'm a child, my work is play." Now, I'll go on and touch later on that play is not just for children, it's for everybody. And we all play. We all have different types of play. For adults, it might be trial and error, having to go at something and trying to figure it out. That is play. All the different types of play, the functions of play, and again, I'll touch a little bit on it later on, but It could take up about 2 hours just for the types of play alone. But again, it's about the child initially, and that's if it starts as if play is incorporated into children's lives as much as they can, that they are playing as much as they can, then it's going to help them in later life. And again, I'll touch on a little bit about that later on, but so will Richard. So why does play matter? Play is, as I said, it brings order to chaos, but it builds deep and powerful relationships for children. And again, not only in terms of the physical aspects, so you can bring in a theme of catching or a theme of handling, and I have a video later on of how I've done that. But it's to show me what you can do. So then you're getting an aspect of what the children can do. And if you ask an adult, show me what you can do with the ball, the adult is always going to do something that they're comfortable with, that they can do, and the child will do that as long as they're safe and sound. When it's free play, and I do free play in speech bubbles because it is free, but technically it's not, because there is rules. They have their own rules. So if they're safe and sound, then they're going to make sure that they're not going to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else. And the deep play comes into that as well. So deep play is more dangerous. But when you bring it back to what the children is learning, they're learning so much through their own communication, through speech and language, as I said, listen to each other, listen to the coach. You're bringing in the different senses, so touch, sight, how they listen, how they incorporate, how they interpret your words and how they interpret the words of their friends, as well as then the initial social emotional connection, which is probably one of the biggest things that is lacking, especially in the situation that we're all in terms of the restrictions. And play has been taken away from children, but play has been taken away from everybody because we have been so restricted. So that social emotional connection to people, but also to the sport, to your club, to your community, is so vital, and play plays a huge part in that. The biggest thing for me in terms of my own coaching philosophy is they're not many adults. The reality of their own learning and development they'll take 3 steps back before they'll go 1 step forward. And as you see there, the quote with Phil Rogers at the bottom says play is the work of childhood. But again, I bring it back that play for youth and adults is extremely important throughout life. You know, that you have to have a want to play, but also that you're confident to play. And when you're coaching, that's a little bit more difficult because you're giving the control over to the children or to the players. And that's a very difficult concept for some coaches. And again, I'll go over a little bit later on about just how I overcame that. Again, it was a lot to do with the training we would have got before. But again, as I said, the reality is that they're going to learn at different stages. They're going to need more help and more assistance. So you might have to help them along that journey a little bit more. So more collaboration between yourself and the coach, the coach and the child. You might be able to challenge them more. So give them a more difficult task or a more difficult skill. But again, put it into the game, put it into making sure that they're trying to learn from themselves and make decisions, be creative. And again, that's a different element of play. But also to give them a chance to just show you what you can do. Make up their own games with their friends. What can you do with 4 cones and a ball in a group? All the different games that you can do, all the different activities you can do. And again, just let them at it. Again, as long as they're safe and sound. So who is it for? Obviously, it's for the child. And it's extremely important in terms of the human right and the right to play that the child's voice is heard. That you ask the child, what are their needs and wants? Now, their needs and wants can be completely different to your own thought process on that. So the child will want to play with a balloon all the time, doesn't want to play with a football or a tennis racket or go on their bike. However, their need to improve their skills, or if they're going to get a football club or a hockey club or cycling club or a walking club, they're going to have to actually learn the fundamentals. So you'll have to think about their wants and what they want themselves, but also tailored again to what their needs are. So again, in terms of skill development, but it's so important that you involve them in that process. So hear their voice, ask them questions, ask them what they want, and don't be afraid to let them have it. But again, it's a little bit of collaboration with you as well, that you have the ground rules set and that they're listening and that they're enjoying their friends' company, that they're safe and sound with their friends, safe and sound with each other. But again, this is about you as a coach as well, because it's important that you embrace play. And again, it doesn't have to be through the research. There's loads of different ways to do that. But by asking them a question, what would you like to do today? You're bringing in imaginative play there, because they might be thinking of a different game. You're bringing in a little bit of object play, because how they're going to utilize the kind of equipment that you're using. You're definitely bringing in creative play and social play if they're in a group. If not, then you'd be bringing in solitary play if they're working on their own. You can also have locomotor play. So if you're looking at all the different skills that you want them to do, but again, they're doing the skills without realizing it, and that's what you're concentrating on. That's what you're observing. So it's a fluid way of coaching. But again, there's a method in the madness, and without actually telling them what you're doing, you can get a good gauge of how they're improving, what they want, how you can involve them in their learning, but also they'll not be long telling you, what they enjoy doing. And I can guarantee you that when they're playing with their friends, when they're happy and enjoying, they are learning, right? And that is proven in the research also. So, as I said, I touched on the rights of the child and the needs and wants. But there's an element of play has to be purposeful. So the child might realize it's purposeful, and this is where the coaching kind of comes in. That you might have an idea in your head that, okay, we're going to look at, as I said, touched on earlier on, handling, and you'll see the video later on that I'm going to show you. But you're asking them what they want or what they're learning, or you're asking, well, how can you make it harder for yourself, or how can you make it easier? Right? And again, as long as they're safe and sound, then you're preparing the child for the path rather than the path for the child. So rather than tarmacking the path in front of them, telling them what to do, showing them what to do, getting them from A to B, and it's your A to B, not theirs. But remember, the reality is completely different. So when you prepare the child for their decision making, for resilience, making sure that they create order from the chaos, as I touched on earlier on, but it's through their experiences. And that's going to be so much more beneficial when they move up through the age grades, when they get older, because they'll be able to think for themselves. They'll be able to make decisions. They'll be able to communicate with friends, communicate with teammates, communicate with the coach, the referee, whoever it is. But also that, I feel as if they're going to be, better people as well, more well-rounded individuals. And especially in terms of sport, that's extremely important, because you obviously have the child and the coach, huge relationship, but the parents are so important. And that teamwork between the parents, the coaches, the club, and the community is vital. And that's where sports clubs and sports teams, but also sports clubs for individual participants and individual sports is so important. If they have that philosophy that it's a team game, even though it might be an individual sport, but you're working with your coach, who's working with the parent, who's working with the club, and then you're putting them into the community, and they're being really good people, they're wearing the club gear, and they're going down to the shop, and they're getting your club is getting feedback that those children and those players are really, really, they behave themselves, they have good manners, they come in, say please and thank you, and I like that. So that can all be taught through play, and that can all be learned through play, and it's learning without even realizing sometimes. So just to touch on my research, so playing sport, the title is Playing Sport, Understanding the Role of Play for Coaches and Children. Now, the 4 questions in terms of my research is what do coaches understand play to be in the context of sport, as you can see there. And those are the questions that are always in my head. But the biggest one is my own reflections and my own coaching and bringing the theory to practice, but also practice the theory. So that kind of mishmash of what I'm reading to can I actually put that into practice? And if not, okay, well, I'll reflect on it and I'll change it. And make it more relevant for the children that I'm coaching or the players that I'm coaching, because depending on the children's behaviour, depending on their age, obviously, is going to have a huge impact on what you can do with them. But again, asking them is so important, and it'll give you a good gauge of what they enjoy doing. But actually, just a simple thing of asking me, show me what you can do. That there is huge. And again, you'll see it in the video later on. This here is, again, part of my research is in the Doctor of Professional Practice Leeds Beckett. I have a couple of project outputs. The first one is the I Coach Kids podcast. There's going to be 6 dedicated episodes to play. The first one is already up, episode 5 with Claire Daniels from the FA on the power of play. And the next one then is looking at a play framework, play and sport framework. Now, what you see here is the first draft, and it's an extremely rough first draft. However, I have a few minions, for kind of want of a better word, who are trialing it out for me. A couple of people, and just to mention 2, Dan Steele and Kevin McKiernan, who've been trying it out, and I've also been getting family to try it out, just to have a go at it, just to see what happens. Not for no other reason, just to see what happens. And again, you'll see kind of on this, in terms of the 4 categories: physical development, cognitive, speech and language, and social and emotional. Then in terms of the types of play is the second column, so social play, imaginative play, all the way around. And then the smallest writing in the boxes next to the child and coach is little activities that can be done to facilitate the different type of play for, again, the overarching theme as well. But again, it's a first draft. It's completely changing through my coaching and my reading, and it's changed since. It's an adaptive framework, but it's something that I feel is going to be hugely beneficial to coaches going forward. Looking at this here is one of the things that I like to talk about is kind of the relationship between the coach and the child. So you'll see there, this has been adapted from the pedagogical play framework, and in terms of discovery, so completely child-led, play-based learning. They're at it. The coach, the teacher, is watching them just to make sure they're not hitting each other, boxing each other, hurting each other, that they're safe and sound. And then we go into the collaborative, so the scaffolding and the zone of proximal development that Lev Vygotsky talks about. And it's the relationship between the coach and the child, teacher and the child, but also the parent and the child when they go home. Especially with the situation they're in now, parents have become even more involved in their child's play because the child's been practicing at home because they couldn't go to practice. So that collaborative approach, asking them questions, getting feedback, and it's shared thinking and doing. And then the more purposeful end is more with the coach kind of challenging the child a little bit more. So being more narrow focused in terms of what they want the child to do, what they want the player to do. And again, there's a few elements of that I'll not go into too much, but again, it's more about skill development and in terms of game related. So again, like tactical development, principle of width, actually telling them the principle of width, what they're going to do, but getting them to figure it out during the game. How I kind of trying to coach all the time in terms of, obviously I'm a team sport coach, so trying to do it as much as I can through the family of games. And this is always in my head. So if I get a child at 4 years of age, 3 years of age, to make up a game, chances are the game is going to be a target game. And again, it goes the whole way across to full invasion, where it's 1v1 or 15v15 or 11v11, depending on what sport you're playing. But again, that concept is always in my head because whatever activity they make up, I have it in my head, okay, is that a target, court, field, non-part or full invasion game? Because then I can challenge them to make it harder or easier. And again, that's all the in-service that I've had before has kind of given me the tools to do that and the confidence to do that as well. In terms of my own planning, I plan, but I don't plan. I have an overarching theme in my head. However, working with children and trying to incorporate play into your sessions as much as you can is a complete minefield at times. So your learning outcomes, I don't believe in them per se. They are for me, but I wouldn't give them to a child or a group. I'll give them the overarching theme and what I am hoping to get from the session. But a lot of it depends on them. A lot of it depends on what they can do and what they want and asking them the questions. So it is a little bit ad hoc. However, there is the method of the madness. And when I've been in New York and any clubs I've been working with, I specifically bring the parents in, bring the children in for a workshop and go through my philosophy and why I'm doing it. Because then when the parents come to the sessions, they're fully aware of what's happening and they're more engaged in the session because they know that why I'm doing it, it's for a reason. Just a few videos now. So as we talked about earlier on, this here session is from Rockland in New York. And it was nearly one of the last sessions that I finished on. Now what you're going to see is it might be a little bit blurry and a little bit sketchy in terms of the bandwidth, but the theme was handling and it's complete organized chaos. The parents who are not involved, who are at the side, had a choice of getting involved in their child's play or speaking to a parent that they hadn't spoken to before. So again, you're creating that community of practice, you're creating that meaningful, purposeful environment for children, for coaches, and for players as well. Now, as I said before, play is not just for the children. So you've seen that I didn't know how many were going to come to the session. That's why it was complete organized chaos, because small hall, worried about how many were there, and I just let them at it. But again, I'd already warned the parents about that and what I wanted the parents to do. But this here, I love this quote from Mike Singletary. He's a former MBE All-American, and his favorite part was the opportunity to play. And this is from an adult. This is from a professional NBA or NFL player. And it resonates with me because play is not just for children, it's for youth, adults, for everybody. And again, some of the videos that you'll see is, when we talk about the autonomy supportive environment, and again, you can read that yourself while I play this video, but it encompasses everything that we want in the session, so choice, and meaningful experiences, powerful relationships, and enjoyment. And again, hopefully that'll come through in the videos. There was a workshop I did in Hertfordshire, and that was putting them into groups of 2, and whatever equipment they want to use, they make up their own game. And you can see the different variety of games. There's loads of choice. We actually went round the groups, and they had to show everybody what their game was, but I would do that with 4- and 5-year-olds as well. So having adults do that, it just shows that they can think for themselves, but it's so important that they incorporate that into their coaching sessions as well. The bottom video that you saw was from Ulster GA, and again, very similar premise, only it was individual. So they got to make up their own game. There was music in that as well. So the Blues Brothers were playing. The one above is from Dublin GA. Before I started with them, I done in-service, cross-curriculum in-service with their coaches. And that activity you would have seen plenty of times in terms of before from me, maybe, but also from Richard Cheetham, and that's who I got it from. The balloons and the amount of laughter it brings, but again, you're creating that environment and that enjoyment and love for what you're doing. And the last video that you're going to see here is a video that my wife took. Didn't know she was taking it, but again, plays for everybody. And anybody who knows me will know that I hate getting my feet wet. I don't like getting wet. My OCD kind of kicks in terms of tidiness around the house. But that was brilliant fun. A couple of seconds was class. And I didn't know she took it until then. But it's great, just goes to show you what, and that's the best form of play that I can show you in terms of me, myself, is just letting at it, having a go at it. As I said, the play is for the child, for youth, and for the adult. The two quotes that you see are from Disney, and in terms of some of the research coming out now and some of the programs, UEFA are doing a brilliant program now with the playmakers, and the AFA in terms of obviously they're bringing play into their sessions through Disney to get young girls more involved in football. So the venture outside your comfort zone, the rewards are worth it, and I would hugely advocate that for you to do as a coach. What Rapunzel says goes. And then Merlin, who we all love. And again, it's a great quote in terms of having a go. So, you know, if you don't try, you'll never know. And again, making a mistake is fine. Just reflect on it and change it. There's nothing wrong with that. But it also comes back to the child in you. So reflect on what you're doing. Inspire the next generation. You are an inspiration as a coach. The impact that you have is huge. You could be the best part of their week. You know, they could be having issues at home, in school, etc. And they come to the sessions and they're smiling. And you know you have them. So you include everybody, no matter what their ability is, what they can do. Include everybody in terms of inclusion and diversity. But some things that you're all superheroes to me. And this, what you see here, children like wet cement, whatever falls in makes an impression. My experiences in New York, but especially in Ireland with Ulster GA previous to my role in New York, had a huge impact on me and the people who I've been working with and been involved with, because they make such a difference to me and they've helped me along the way. And this here is actually a friend's son and her father. And it's a great picture. It just shows you the inspiration that you have for children and the impression that you make on them. And whatever falls on them, that's positive or negative. So please make sure it's a positive experience. Embrace the chaos and get involved in play as much as you can. It's fun, it's enjoyable. There's a method in the madness. And again, we could touch on the research a lot more. We could do this for another 3 or 4 hours, but I'm very wary of handing over to the main event. I've went a little bit over time in terms of Richard, and I apologize, but Richard's going to take over for now. I would like to thank you for listening. It's great when you get thanked as a coach. The picture at the bottom is my last session with the local school in New York at Lincoln Avenue, the Lincoln Lions. And again, love going into the school, but again, they let me have a go at things, try things, and it was great. But we play, everybody plays, and it's so important that the children do, and that they embrace play, but also that you do as well. Thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to listening to Richard and making some notes and a load of notes. And just before we do finish, is your questions at the end, please be nice. Thanks.
Thank you, Owen. Fantastic. I can't be billed as the main event at all. We just spoke about teamwork and a lot of lovely things that I want to link in with your presentation, which I'll do this evening. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to Wednesday night. Hopefully the smaller children are in bed and the bigger children are up playing. Really going to follow on from Owen's presentation, and also just make sure that one of the things that I try to achieve through this is to show you some really good examples. I often feel that there's a need for us as coaches to convince some of the skeptics as to its role and its impact, and that play isn't learning. So the videos I use really are examples of how it's been successful from my coaching, and from one which came in today from a coach, which I'll love to share with you. So the presentation is available for everybody, and thank you, Simon, for doing that, because obviously we only take so much information down, but I've tried to reflect these 9 elements in the presentation. So it's kind of like a bingo exercise, really, that all of these elements will be present in the practical application, which you'll see a bit later. From enjoyable to spontaneity, multisensory, the play is innate, and play right in the middle is learning. It's not wasted time, which sometimes is the arm wrestle you have with a skeptic, and that could be a fellow coach, that could be a parent, that could be an adult who is in a session you're running where you put a play element in it. So just an example of some coaches I work with in Switzerland. These are cycling coaches. I'm looking at the feeling that we as adults come from a constrained world. Where we work, there is constraints and limits, and we move into the space that's kind of owned and occupied by the children, and we have to go from one fairly constraining environment to one where we really want to nurture and encourage playfulness and freedom. So we have to kind of wear 2 hats, and it's that transition from one to the other which we need to make well, to make sure that we can provide that environment. What I try to do in my work with coaches is the experiential learning. So I felt that experience, and I want the children I coach to feel that experience too. I've reconnected with my childhood. I've seen the value of it. I remember it, and I want to pass that on. And the last sentence there, which is, remember, this is all about them. And absolutely, this is that one childhood that we have, and to make it memorable, and to make sure that play, which is, you know, as Owen says, is a human right, but it's also developmental, critical element of the developmental part of a childhood as well. Just some sessions I want to show, messing around with some adults. This is the work of adults. I work a lot on projection, and what I mean by projection is what you project will come back from the people you're in front of you. So if you are playful and I like to use the word courageous rather than vulnerable, listen, I'm going to enter your world, and I project enthusiasm and playfulness, that will come back. And if you project caution and constraints and limits, that's really what you're going to feel will come back from those you coach. And this is what I've experienced, and some examples, a wonderful example, which I'll show you in a video. So a little picture exercise on the left, adults, adult drawings, and as Owen says, give some adults a few straws and some balloons, and who knows what they come up with. And what I really liked about the work on the right-hand side is a group of adult coaches who never met each other before. It's their day one, and they worked together. They showed creativity, they showed freedom, and they weren't constrained. And I wanted to set the benchmark for the coaching philosophy that I try to embody, and I want them to consider as well. Right at the back, you might see a cut-out cardboard image with an R necklace around it. They actually decided to do me on an upturned coffee cup with very bushy ginger sideburns. So that was their impression of me. Again, I was quite happy with it because it felt I kind of created that environment for them to do that. Have a look at this video. There's a little bit of dialogue before. I don't want to take up too much time on these videos, but this was a session I ran for coaches during the early stages of the opportunity for players to return to play at rugby coaching. So we had one to 6, and the coaches had said, put the ball in the legs, they turn, pick the ball up, and run to the line that they're facing. So it's a head-to-head competition. When the video plays, look in the far left at the player on the top, and then just see what happens. This wasn't anything I told them to do, anything I gave them ideas or discussed with them. This is something that they created. So just have a look at the video from start to finish.
What I like about this is the fact that I like those sequential conflict treatment.
So look at the player in the top left. So I was trying to create an environment that I really wanted the players to adopt in terms of freedom, being playful. You know, Owen talks about failure, which is really that when we really want to kind of emphasize that failure is learning, but the consequences of failure are important. How do I deal with that player? Really influence what happened next. So look what happened next. Looking at the player in the middle on the right.
Okay, go.
I get excited by things like that. You know, for me, that was wonderful. That was something I hadn't scripted or planned. The coaches watched it, celebrated the first attempt by the lad who didn't catch it, and then that kind of infectious challenge and freedom of creativity and risk taking. And you know, I wanted to show you examples from coaching practice, that ones that will give you that encouragement to try these things, to embody this as part of your coaching practice. You saw the responses from the parents and coaches at the side, and you saw the players' response as well. I'm going to revisit these. Some work by Ray Peaker, who's done some excellent work on early child development. It's a fantastic book called Running Start. Play promotes a wide variety of skills, and the point underneath, an inherent desire to learn and discover. You'll see that in every stage of childhood, that from when they start to put things in their mouth, in its early years, to taste and find out what the shapes are like, right the way through to that childhood experience. On the right hand side, which Michael Rosen's Book of Play, the watertight compartments, in other words, we silo learning. How can we cross over and throw in a mix of different educational concepts, and fine line allowing us to fail. So I've showed some examples of these in the work that follows. They're really good books. If you want to take one of the two of those, they're very worthwhile reading. Okay, so again, this is something I didn't script. The phrase experience shape you. It really was important for me to think that the experience I have, positive or negative, will influence my next actions and influence the actions of those around me. On the left-hand side, 6 on a new bike, and on the right-hand side, it's the next bike up, but just before her 10th birthday. Now, I'm going to be not using my daughter's videos throughout my coaching, but I wanted you to see something that for me was reflective of what I wanted to try and reflect upon. Listen to the first one and watch the second one. This is the first one, 6 years old. Listen to the end of it. This is why play is important. Now, for me, that's a win. That's something that I would absolutely celebrate. If the people I'm coaching, the children I'm coaching, are evoking that for feeling and emotion from a playful experience, then I kind of think that's exactly what I want, because they'll come back next week, they'll remember it, they'll try things, and they'll look back on that moment. So look back on that moment 4 years ago. It was a pure coincidence, and then it was a rainy day. Went to a place called Rake, which is a downhill mountain bike track. My daughter has a GoPro. I have, you know, the nerves, if you like, of watching what's about to happen. You'll hear me from the sidelines, hopefully not too much. But again, listen to the end of the video. is where the 3 jumps come in now.
Like how you're going down.
So I know it kind of reflection from my world, if you like, but that's the world I want. I want you to think about what you're creating, that wonderful opportunity for the script that you kind of want to influence but not want to write. And you know, it's really important that this love of what the child does, it continues right the way through. I have had a good experience and I continue to do that. And the laughing at the end of both those videos for me is reflective of what a playful environment looks like. And those who maybe are not quite sure think, well, but play isn't learning. Well, actually, play will encourage learning. Play will give you those transferable skills, give you that fearlessness, that love of what you do. And Owen slide with the MBA players, the best part of practice is when we play. Well, that's coming from an adult. Just remember why you did it in the first place. Just again from reflections of that childhood, which really grounds me. I go from a workplace where I'm the adult and have to kind of you know, abide by the rules and constraints of that, to the child's world where I want them to not have the shackles, and I want to enter that space and observe the freedom and create that desire to learn and discover. So 3 reflections of different experiences, but all driven by that child to learn and discover. Look at the kind of 20 seconds, which was 20 minutes on the left. I may have shown this before. Now, for me, that's wonderful. I don't step in, I watch, maybe I can guide, but that's the discovery. That's the trial and error. That's the falling down and getting back up. And that will be something that will be right the way through their childhood, the fearlessness of the consequences of making a mistake. There was an ice cream van, I've mentioned this before, an ice cream van was right next to, my daughter loves ice creams, and that didn't even draw away from the plank of wood and the log for 20 minutes. I was desperate for one, I have to say. Okay, so a bit of a balloon theme, but what I want you to try and, you know, if I get one thing from this evening as trying to pass over really, and you know, me and Owen, I'm sure if we went to the same school and the same age, we'd kind of be, you know, the biggest kids in the classroom. It's a shame that we met a bit later on in our life, but you know, go in as an advocate of play. Go in projecting the importance of play. But don't be hesitant, and be the biggest child in the group. You know, Eddie Jones used to speak about, listen, I'm the most enthusiastic person at training, because what I project is what I get back. I mentioned that before. So support play. On the left-hand side, Canadian Coaching Conference, never met any of them, 65 I think in the room. Give them a balloon. I know this is kind of a bit of my, I haven't ever just known for balloons, but you know, it embodied really the fact that I felt that experience. It was fun. I've added mental health on there. That's a very important aspect of it. You know, that freedom from constraints and the seriousness of our work. And when we coach, it's an opportunity for us to create an environment that we want to be in, that is one that is playful, enjoyable, and going to give us that mental well-being. Disruption. You know, Russell Earnshaw, you know, a good friend of mine, called me a disruptor, and I felt like I was like a badge of honor. I was delighted to be called that. Someone who can just throw things in and just, you know, change things around a bit. And then Craig Morris, another good friend of mine, sent me this video today. I'd watched his warm-ups a while ago with the slalom canoe, and he'd gone away, just thought about warm-ups, and this came from this morning, an Olympic slalom canoe during their warm-up. So in other words, how can we be playful even at the highest levels of performance? short video, exploration, discovery. How can I use this? How can I get myself warmed up with the Swiss ball on the water before I actually get into the channels where I'll be doing all the challenging movements in that high intensity environment. So play does it come across all ages, you know, and all parts of that developmental pathway. So it isn't exclusive to the child. And if you watch the video a bit later, and I'm going to have a chat with Craig tomorrow, just, you know, what was learned from there? You know, I have had a question that be a bit fun, you know, is not learning. So why is it important? But listen, the athlete is there in their world, trying, experimenting, finding out how they can use that. I had this from a workshop in Oxford. I think it must have been 4 or 5 years ago when I was started to do some workshops, and this is Project 500, and Lou Arnold, who I've worked with, this, you know, I'm very lucky to be surrounded by such, you know, great enthusiastic people who are happy to blow balloons up and draw and do the various different things that I've done in workshops. But I finished the workshop for Project 500, which is a women's coaching initiative, fantastic project. And I look back on this wonderful wall. I write a memory wall, right on the wall, graffiti, what you thought of the session. It's got challenging, creative, thank you. And right in the bottom, which I've gone over and highlighted, it said, not a fan. And I thought, oh, ouch. But you must realize that, you know, as a play, when you encourage coaches to use play, that you won't win everybody over. And that's fine. That's fine. But it's about you sticking to, you know, the word that Owen mentions, which is the fundamental, the principles of play, the theory behind it, the importance of it. So you will meet a skeptic, but it certainly never stops me from carrying on what I believe and I know, and others know, is critical to it. Okay, so these are some students who they've now graduated and moved on, grown up. So, you know, are we creating spaces free of constraints? Something I mentioned before, think about where you work and where you go to coach. You have to kind of walk into a different world. The constraints of work and the rules, the adult working environment is very different from the one you're going to enter. So be mindful of that. And what I showed here, which is something that, you know, I've now got to move into online lectures because of COVID. But prior to that, what you see below was my lecture room. I went out of the room on a Friday morning, looked outside, the sun was shining, so I took the students outside and we did that for 3 weeks. As Michael Rosen says, you know, it's a mistake to think of all play and education in watertight compartments, separated off from each other. So play does this, and another subject does this, and skill acquisition does this. But in fact, it's the melting pot where they will all complement one another. Okay, so what I've gone back is to Michael Rosen's work again. On the left-hand side, just take the students to Flip Out, which is the indoor trampoline centre. I think I see Ross Learnshaw on the top left-hand side, who came along to watch. There was 28 students, I think it's 28 there. I just said, go and explore. Just go and explore the environment you're in. Try things. Now, we just watched, myself and Russell just watched. I don't do gymnastics on the course as part of the coaching degree they're on. And 10 of the 28 students could do somersaults. Maybe did some more, but the 10 tried it and did it. I asked them, where did you do that? And those students had learned on trampolines in their back garden. So there's a classic case of experimentation, the use of play. It's meaningful to you. I want to do that. So that kind of move from play, which is discovery, to something that we see as something, oh, you've learned to do that now. But it came from that freedom that play gives you. On the right-hand side, the same students using Lego. I wanted them to learn about the importance of play and how we can encourage that. So it was actually going from a practical space to a classroom space. I said, build anything you want, anything at all. And we had numbers of different random things that didn't look like anything you and I would recognize. And I thought, that's that discovery piece. And I said, now you've discovered, now you've explored the environment you're in. How would a coach then take that to the next stage? We've done that playfulness. Now we want to kind of shape it and direct it towards something that looks like what we want them to do in the end. And I said, okay, the next stage then is I want you to build something from the leftover pieces you haven't used. And I want you to make it as tall as you can. It's freestanding, but it's got to be really, really aesthetically pleasing. So it's like a work of art. So we moved from that playful discovery to something where they were kind of guided in still a quite a playful environment. And that's where I think we need to go on our coaching, is yes, let's play, explore, discover, and then just throw a few things in. Okay, well, now you can do that. I'd like you to see you move backwards. I'd like to see you do a forward roll when you've done that. So you kind of shape that environment very subtly by using play as a vehicle for learning in a lot more explicit way. I will get an invoice at the end from my daughter's image rights and copyright. This is Sir Ken Robinson, who sadly passed away recently. If empathy begins by recognizing in ourselves the emotions that others are feeling and how we would feel in the same circumstance. Now, I've chosen this because I think we need to be empathetic. Well, it's important to be empathetic. What does their world need to be like? What should they be experiencing? What would I like to experience? What are they experiencing? I can relate to that. So this is the Gran Canaria 5 years ago. I mean, I dragged this one up and I thought, I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it. I will get some bubbles at some point. Gone with balloons, but onto bubbles. But look at the last piece and see if you notice what I noticed at the very last part of the video. I mean, it's not a question, it's not a test, you know, but what I saw when I watched it again was I thought, wow, and, you know, Kitty, that's how off she goes. She runs after that bubble. It's meaningful, it has purpose, it's something that she wants to do, that real desire. You know, Owen talks about that desire. You know, when you play, there's a real desire and real passion. And I looked and I thought, I watched the first bit and I watched the end bit and I thought, brilliant. I mean, just carrying on until she can catch one. Okay, so some final things before we go into Q&A. Again, these will be available. If you're thinking about, you know, really enhancing the play or talking to somebody who's not quite sure, just remember the motor skills that we want to get in young people, like physical literacy, those fundamentals that we really should make the focal point of those early years, you know, can be developed through play, are developed through play, and unpredictable environments. Let children be spontaneously reactive. That's the non-linear environment. So, you know, if you're going to do agility, don't put cones down because that's predicted their environment for them. Get them to run arbitrary directions, push them left and right, backwards, forwards. Give them a stimulus, not a fixed point like a cone. Trying to spend too much time with your planning. You know, I've got a note down here, and I just thought about, you know, being forced to play. Listen, you know, if you force somebody to play, I want you to put play in there. It doesn't become play anymore. It isn't. It ceases to be something that should be innate and spontaneous. You can encourage, watch, model, but don't ever force them to get them to think about it. Provoke thought. The third one down, play is an excellent way for the coach to connect with the group. I mean, when the students graduate, maybe they'll say to me, I never learned the academic side of you, Rich, but you know what? I learned the importance of play. We had really good connections. We had good discussions. We shared experiences. And I think, what would your best teacher, best coach look like? What would they leave you with? And, you know, that's what really drives me. I have a good connection. I reach out, make it inclusive, make it touch people, make them think about what they're doing, how that will influence their coaching. And the last one, which is play allows a diminished consciousness of self. What does that mean? Well, I can just throw the shackles off. And Owen, when I first met Owen was a few years ago at a workshop, and he reminded me of it, and I reminded him of the end part of the story, where it was 9 o'clock in the morning. The coaches sat around waiting for doing the presentation, and it was cold, and I thought the temperature of the room was kind of cold as well, a bit of that nervousness. An hour and a half later, I had 35, 40 coaches running around pretending to be butterflies. They'd thrown the shackles off, they'd thrown their armour off, and they were free and felt that the environment that they were in was one they weren't judged and could freely express themselves. And that's that diminished consciousness of self. I'm not self-conscious. I feel I can really go for it. And yeah, make another reward. I've said this before, you know, play shouldn't be something, if you behave yourself, you can play. If you do well in this, you can play. Be intuitive, use play, you know, it's like jazz, you know, you bring it in, take it out when it feels right. When they fatigue, lift them up with play. Ask them how they want to start. Don't make it that something they have to earn. Make it something that is, as Owen says, is a right. It's actually right through their work. And you've seen from the videos, one which I thank Craig for, and I thank all the players in the first one and my students for actually being not just advocates, but also embodying it in their actions. So just remember, you know, whose session it is. And thank you very much. There's my details. If you want to ask any more questions or contact me, I can send you some articles, and even just want to have a Zoom conversation, then please feel free to do that. Thank you very much, everybody.